The first man to try had been thrown before he could even touch the horse's hoof. By noon, 3 more had stepped forward, each one more confident than the last, each one walking away with dust on their backs and silence in their mouths. The wild black horse stood in the center of the yard like it owned the land, muscles tight, eyes sharp, daring anyone to come close. Folks had started to gather along the fence, hats pulled low, voices quiet, waiting to see if anyone could do what no cowboy had managed yet. It was a hard summer day, the kind where the heat presses down on your shoulders and the air feels thick enough to hold. The barn behind them creaked in the dry wind, and the ground was packed with hoof marks from all the failed attempts. A few of the men leaned on the wooden rail, wiping sweat from their necks, shaking their heads. They had handled rough horses before, broken colts that kicked and bit, but this one was different. This one didn't just fight back. It watched you, measured you, like it already knew how things would end. The horse had been found wandering near the edge of the property. No brand, no saddle marks, nothing to tell where it came from. Some said it had broken free from a traveling outfit. Others swore it had never belonged to anyone at all. Either way, it needed shoeing or it would lame itself on the hard ground before long. And no man there seemed able to get the job done. A hammer lay in the dirt where the last cowboy had dropped it. No one moved to pick it up. That was when she stepped through the gate. At first, no one said a word. Most of them just stared, unsure if they were seeing things right. A woman had no place in that yard, not for this kind of work, not with a horse like that. She wore a plain black dress, the kind that had seen too many long days, and an apron stained from use. Her hands were steady, though, and her eyes didn't wander. She walked straight toward the tools as if she had been there before. A couple of the men shifted, exchanging looks. One of them let out a quiet laugh under his breath, not cruel, just certain. Another scratched his beard and muttered something about this being no job for her, but she didn't look their way. She bent down, picked up the hammer, brushed the dirt off it with the edge of her apron, and checked the nails like she knew what she was doing. Someone finally spoke, asking if she understood what kind of animal she was dealing with. She paused just long enough to glance at the horse. It had turned its head toward her now, ears flicking, watching her every step. "I do," she said, her voice calm, almost too calm for the moment. There was something about the way she stood there that made the yard go quiet again, not loud, not proud, just steady, like she had nothing to prove and no reason to rush. The horse shifted its weight, stamping once, sending a puff of dust into the air. A few of the men leaned forward, expecting the same outcome they had already seen. They had felt that power up close, that sudden burst of force that left no room for mistakes. No one lasted more than a few seconds. She walked closer anyway. Each step was slow, careful, like she was listening for something no one else could hear. The horse lowered its head just a little, not in surrender, but in warning, the kind that came before a strike. Behind her, the men held their breath. She reached out her hand, and just before her fingers touched the black coat, the horse tensed, muscles tightening, ready to explode. The horse's muscles tightened under its dark coat, a ripple of strength that made every man by the fence lean back just a little. They had seen that look before. It came right before the kicking, right before the chaos. But the woman did not pull her hand away. She held it there, steady, not forcing, not afraid. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the horse let out a sharp breath, hot air brushing against her fingers. It didn't strike, it didn't rear. It simply watched her, the same way it had watched the others. Only now there was something quieter in its gaze, something unsure. A murmur passed through the men behind her. One of them straightened up, frowning as if he had missed something important. Another shifted his weight, no longer leaning so casually on the rail. She moved closer by a single step, her hand lowering just enough to touch the horse's neck. The contact was light, careful, like she understood how thin the line was between calm and disaster. Dust clung to the hem of her dress as she stood there, small beside the animal, yet somehow not out of place. Someone whispered that it would not last, that the horse was only waiting for the right second. But she stayed where she was. The yard seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind felt like it had slowed, dragging across the dry ground in soft, restless currents. The barn creaked again in the distance, a hollow sound that echoed across the silence. It had not always been like this for her. Not long ago, she had stood in a different kind of quiet. A smaller yard, a broken fence, a house that felt too empty at night. There had been another pair of hands once, stronger hands, guiding hers, showing her how to hold the tools, how to read a horse before it ever moved. She had learned by watching, by listening, by doing the work no one noticed until it mattered. When those hands were gone, the work did not stop. The animals still needed tending, the ground still needed care, and so she kept going, one day after another, even when the silence pressed in harder than the heat ever could. That was where she learned patience. Not the kind that waits for things to change, but the kind that understands they might not. Back in the yard, the black horse shifted again, its hoofs scraping against the dirt. A few of the men tensed, ready for the same sudden burst of power they had already faced. One reached for the rail as if bracing himself for impact. But the woman's hand moved with the horse, never leaving its neck. She spoke then, low and steady, words too soft for anyone else to catch. It was not a command. It sounded more like a rhythm, something meant for the horse alone. The animal's ears flicked back and forth, listening. A man near the end of the fence shook his head slowly, his earlier confidence gone. He had tried to force the horse, tried to show it who was in charge. It had answered him with dust and pain. Now he watched, unsure of what he was seeing. She stepped closer again, until she stood near the horse's shoulder. Close enough now that one wrong move could send her to the ground. The hammer still hung loosely in her hand, forgotten for the moment. The horse lowered its head a fraction, not fully, just enough to change the shape of the moment. It was not submission, not yet, but it was something. The men exchanged quiet looks, their earlier doubt turning into something harder to name. No one laughed now. No one spoke out of turn. The yard had shifted and they all felt it. Still, the risk had not gone anywhere. The horse's strength was still there, coiled and waiting. One mistake would be enough. One wrong touch, one sudden move, and everything could turn in a heartbeat. She drew in a slow breath, her eyes never leaving the animal. The calm in her face did not mean the danger was gone. It only meant she understood it. Then, without warning, the horse lifted its front hoof off the ground, not in a strike, but not in trust either. The lifted hoof hung in the air, tense and uncertain, as if the horse itself had not decided what came next. A few men along the fence drew in sharp breaths. They had seen hooves rise like that before, and it never ended quietly. One wrong move, and the animal could strike with enough force to break bone. The dust beneath it stirred, waiting. She did not reach for it right away. Instead, she shifted her stance, slow and careful, placing her feet firmly in the dirt. Her hand stayed on the horse's neck, fingers steady, as if reminding it she was still there. The other hand, the one holding the hammer, remained low and still. She knew better than to rush. Behind her, a man spoke under his breath, saying she should step back while she still could. Another muttered that no shoeing job was worth the risk. Their voices carried just enough to be heard, but she gave no sign of listening. The horse's ears flicked again, catching every sound. Its lifted hoof trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the strain of holding that position. It was a test, the kind animals make when they are unsure whether to trust or fight. She had seen that before. On long days when the wind cut across open land, when a young horse refused the bridle or a stubborn mule planted its feet and would not move, it was never about strength alone. It was about knowing when to push and when to wait. The men watching did not all see it that way. To them, a horse was something to be handled, controlled, brought in line. That had been their way for years, passed from one ranch to another. It worked often enough until it didn't. One of the older men by the fence shifted forward, his brow furrowed. He had been quiet longer than the rest. There was something in his eyes that looked less like doubt and more like recognition, as if he was trying to place a memory he could not quite reach. The woman drew a slow breath, her shoulders rising and falling just once. Then she moved. Not toward the hoof, but slightly to the side, changing her angle. The horse noticed immediately. Its head lifted a little, eyes sharp again, the calm from moments before thinning at the edges. Dust clung to its legs, its dark coat shining under the harsh sun. For a second, it looked like the moment might break. A gust of wind pushed through the yard, rattling the loose boards of the barn. Something banged in the distance, sudden and loud. The horse flinched, its body tightening, the lifted hoof jerking slightly higher. A few men stepped back, expecting the worst. But she stayed. Her voice came again, low and steady, cutting through the noise without rising above it. It was not loud, but it carried a kind of weight that made the moment hold together. The horse's head turned toward her, its focus pulled back from the sudden sound. Still, the tension had changed. The air felt sharper now, thinner somehow, like everything was balanced on a narrow edge. One wrong move would tip it over. The horse's hoof remained raised, but the patience in it was fading. The test was running out of time. She knew it. And the men knew it too, even if they could not say how. Near the fence, a younger cowboy clenched his jaw, his earlier confidence gone completely. He had been the second to try that morning, and the bruise along his arm still showed through the dust. Watching her now, he could not decide if she was brave or simply unaware of what could happen. The older man beside him did not look away. His gaze stayed fixed on her hands, on the way she moved, like he was trying to understand something he had missed all his life. The horse shifted its weight again, the raised hoof starting to lower, then pausing halfway, caught between decision and instinct. She slowly bent her knees, bringing herself closer to its side, close enough now that she could reach for the hoof if she chose to, but she did not take it yet. The hammer hung quietly at her side, the nails still untouched. Everything in the yard seemed to wait on that one choice. And then the horse jerked its leg back without warning, pulling it just out of reach, its body tightening once more as a low, restless energy surged through it again. The sudden pull of the horse's leg sent a ripple through the yard. A few men cursed under their breath, certain the moment had broken for good this time. The animal stepped sideways, its hooves pressing deep into the dry dirt, head lifting high again. That restless energy came back stronger, like a storm that had only paused, not passed. She did not chase the movement. Instead, she stepped back just enough to give the horse space, her hand lowering slowly to her side. It was a small retreat, but it mattered. The kind of choice that told the animal she was not there to trap it. Dust swirled lightly around her boots as she shifted her weight, steady as ever. For a moment, it looked like everything might return to where it started. Another failed attempt, another story the men would carry with them about a horse no one could handle. One of them even let out a breath like he had already accepted it. But she stayed in place. Her eyes remained on the horse, not sharp, not challenging, just present, waiting. The horse circled half a step, then another, testing the space between them. Its tail flicked once, then stilled. The yard seemed quieter now, as if the earlier noise had drained away, leaving only the sound of shifting dirt and slow breathing. From the fence, no one spoke anymore. Even the man who had laughed before now leaned forward, his elbows on the rail, watching closely. The older one beside him had narrowed his eyes, not in doubt, but in focus. Whatever he had started to recognize earlier was becoming clearer, piece by piece. The woman drew in another slow breath and took a step forward again. This time, she did not reach out right away. She moved alongside the horse's shoulder, matching its pace, her steps light but certain. It was not force. It was not fear either. It was something in between, something that asked for a different kind of answer. The horse's head lowered slightly, then lifted again, uncertain. Its ears flicked toward her voice as she spoke under her breath, that same steady rhythm, like a quiet thread tying the moment together. The tension had not gone anywhere. It had only changed shape. The sun beat down harder now, casting sharp shadows across the yard. Sweat traced along her temple, but she did not wipe it away. The hammer in her hand caught a brief glint of light, a reminder of the work still waiting to be done. She stopped once more, close to the horse's side. This time, when she raised her hand, she did not hesitate. Her fingers brushed against its neck again, firmer than before, but still careful. The horse flinched at the touch, its muscles tightening, but it did not pull away completely. That alone made a few of the men shift where they stood. One of them whispered something about time running out. Another shook his head slowly, as if he could not believe how far this had gone already. No one had come close to this point all morning. Still, it was not enough. The real test had not come yet. The horse shifted again, lifting its front hoof halfway, then setting it down, then lifting it once more. It was restless now, caught between instinct and something it did not fully understand. The ground beneath it showed fresh marks from that hesitation, shallow imprints that told the story of its struggle. She watched every movement. Then, slowly, she bent down, bringing herself closer to the leg, close enough now that there would be no second chance if it went wrong. Her hand hovered just above the hoof, waiting, not grabbing. The yard tightened around that moment. A breeze moved through, softer this time, carrying the faint scent of dry grass and wood. Somewhere behind the barn, a loose board knocked once, then fell silent. Even the smallest sounds felt louder now. The horse's leg trembled again. Her hand moved closer. Not fast, not sudden, but certain. The men along the fence held their breath without realizing it. One of them gripped the rail so tightly his knuckles turned pale. Another leaned forward as if he could see better by being closer, though none of them dared step into the yard. The horse shifted its weight sharply, its body tensing as if preparing to pull away again. Her fingers brushed the hoof. For a split second, everything seemed to balance there, on that single point of contact. Then the horse stamped hard, not striking her but not steady either, sending a burst of dust into the air as its patience snapped thin again. The sharp stamp echoed through the yard, dust rising in a sudden cloud. A few of the men flinched, certain this was the moment it would all fall apart. The horse's body tightened again, that familiar surge of power returning, but something was different this time. It did not strike out. It did not rear. Her hand did not pull away. She stayed low, steady, her fingers resting lightly against the hoof even as the horse shifted. Her other hand moved up along its leg, firm but calm, guiding rather than forcing. Her voice came again, soft and even, cutting through the tension like a quiet promise. The horse's breathing was heavy now, its chest rising and falling fast, but it did not jerk away. It stood there, caught between instinct and trust, between the wild it knew and the calm she offered. Slowly, almost carefully, she lifted the hoof. A murmur spread across the men by the fence. No one had managed that, not once, not even for a second. Yet here it was, the wild black horse allowing its leg to be held, even if only just. She did not rush. That was the difference. She set the hoof gently against her knee, keeping her balance as the horse shifted its weight. The hammer came into her hand with purpose now, no longer just a tool lying in the dust. Each movement was measured, practiced, like something she had done 100 times before, even if never under so many eyes. The first tap of the hammer was light. The sound carried across the yard, clear and sharp. The horse flinched, its muscles tightening again, but she steadied it with her touch, her voice never breaking. She gave it a moment, just enough for the tension to ease before continuing. Another tap followed, then another. The rhythm built slowly, not rushed, not forced. The kind of rhythm that asked the horse to stay with it, to trust it just a little longer. Dust settled around them as the work went on, each strike of the hammer bringing them closer to something no one there had believed possible. The men watched in silence now. Even the youngest among them, the one who had stepped forward earlier with confidence, stood still, his arms resting on the rail, his eyes fixed on her hands. The older man beside him nodded once, almost to himself, as if something long forgotten had finally found its way back. It did not take long. 15 minutes passed in a way no one could quite measure, the time slipping by with each careful movement. When she lowered the hoof back to the ground, the new shoe sat firm and clean against it. The horse stood still, not wild, not broken, just still. For a moment no one moved. Then the woman stepped back, brushing her hands against her apron, her breathing steady despite the heat and the weight of what had just happened. She looked at the horse once more, her hand rising to its neck in a quiet, final touch. The animal did not pull away. It lowered its head slightly, the tension that had filled the yard now gone, replaced by something softer, something earned. A sound broke the silence behind her. One of the men let out a low whistle, shaking his head in disbelief. Another gave a quiet laugh, not mocking this time, but full of respect. The mood had shifted completely, the doubt replaced with something heavier and more honest. She turned toward the gate without saying a word. No pride, no show, just a simple kind of calm. The hammer hung loosely at her side again, as if it had always belonged there. As she walked past the fence, the men stepped aside without being asked, giving her space in a way they had not before. The older man spoke then, his voice rough but clear, saying she had done what none of them could. She paused for a second, just long enough to meet his eyes. It was never about force, she said quietly. It just needed time. With that, she stepped through the gate and onto the dusty path beyond, leaving the yard behind her. The wild black horse remained where it stood, calm under the open sky, the new shoe set firm against the ground. And the men who had gathered there carried something different with them now, something they had not come for that day. Not just the memory of a hard job done, but the understanding that strength does not always look the way they expect, and that sometimes the quietest hands can do what force never could. Thanks for watching this story. Subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Tell me in the comments what you felt about this story and what kind of stories you want to see next. See you in the next story.